I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, everybody. I don't know. Y'all may have to pinch me down here.
You're excited. I can tell you.
This is a bucket list thing for Bobby.
My goodness.
It's a bucket list thing for all
all
of
of
us.
us. Yeah. Richie, don't pinch me, literally. Don't, please. So, guys, look, let me just go ahead and get started. Welcome, West Point, Mississippi, home of Mossy Oak. And today, we've got a great guest. We've got Mr. Bill Dance.
Not a legend. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. The legend.
Yeah,
There's so many things to say. Welcome, Mr. Dance.
Thank you very much, guys. Good to be with you again.
Yes, sir.
Oh, boy. When I look at the screen and I see him, he's so recognizable.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it.
And legend is the right word, Lane. So we've got a little fact sheet of his tournament career. I don't think we have enough time to read all the accolades.
The man can fish.
Yeah, we may need to do that in post where we just read it all out, but it would take 10 minutes. He doesn't want to hear that.
Well, I can tell you what, it is a whole long list of how successful he's been, but looking at the percentages of when he enters and how he wins is I've never even looked at that before. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it is.
I cheat.
Yep, it's a testament to the great thing is the lifetime of it. Mm-hmm. He turned his lifetime into what he loved. That's a lesson for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Big time.
Mr. Bill, I'd like to start. I'm going to throw out the first question, and I'd love to learn about a young Bill Dance. When you were just growing up, how did you get introduced to fishing, and kind of walk us through that transition to adulthood and saying, I want to fish in these tournaments?
Well, I don't care how old we are. We're all competitive by nature. Mm-hmm. And I grew up, spent a lot of my childhood years in Lynchburg, Tennessee. And there was a creek called Mulberry Creek within a stone's throw of my grandmother's and granddaddy's front porch. And I started wading and fishing the creek. My grandmother would go down and she'd sit on the bank and I'd wade up and down the creek. And, I guess that started, my granddaddy was an avid fisherman. He was a doctor, but he still was an avid fisherman. And living in Lynchburg, the town square would close about dinner time on Wednesdays, and everybody do what they wanted to do, go play golf, go chop weeds out of their garden or go fishing or whatever. But Granddaddy and Grandmother and I we'd go up the creek or down the creek. But I guess it was my granddaddy and my daddy both. I was very, very fortunate to have two guys that loved to fish and took the time to take me. And my granddaddy taught me a lot about anatomy in a fish, how to wade a creek, always wade above a cattle crossing or a hog crossing, how to wade the creek, and talked to me about the currents in the creek, different types of live bait from helger bites to crawfish to stone rollers, minnows that I could catch in a seine just right across the road in the creek from their house. But growing up, I spent a lot of time on Mulberry Creek. And sometimes I'd go up above the stone bridge. Other times I'd go down below the stone bridge, just depending on how much time I could fish before I had to be back to the house. But anyway, I guess I'm gonna kind of jump ahead a little bit.
Sure.
It was what really, really kick-started it, you couldn't buy fishing tackle. We didn't have Walmarts. We didn't have Bass Pro Shops. We didn't academies, any of those type stores. You bought your fishing tackle, your terminal tackle, and any lures that were on the market at a hardware store. And nearly any store you went in, surprised me, Arbogast Lure Company, had the predominant market way back then. But they had a hardware store there in Lynchburg. Connor Motlow owned it. And his brother, Rager Motlow, was the proprietor of Jack Daniel's Distillery. And I fished all around the distillery, the spring branches that came out and flowed into Mulberry Creek, and learned a lot about moving water. But one particular bait I saw in the hardware store was a frog-colored jitterbug. Now, that bait was made in 1934, and today it's still marketable. The bait back then cost 75 cents. Today, I think it costs $6.75. But I took a big liking to that bait. I really did. I just liked everything about it. And this particular Wednesday morning, I was down on the creek. My grandmother would walk out on the porch and take a pan with a wooden spoon and boom, 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 boom. You could hear it a mile. And I took off out of the creek back to the house. She said, your granddaddy's going to go to the lake fishing this afternoon. So you might as well, let me do this for you right now. She took out of her apron a handkerchief, had a knot in it. That was her pocketbook. And she reached in there and gave me 3 silver quarters. And I took off running out the front door, down past the Jack Daniel's Barrel Barns, around the bank, choking up the shirt to the hardware store, and ran in. I said, Tosh, he was kind of random place. I said, I got 75 cents. He said, I put that bait away for you because I knew one day you were going to buy it. Well, I bought it, and back to the house I went. Granddaddy came in. Grandmother would cook fried chicken, pork chops, roast beef, about 5 or 6 different kind of vegetables. We had a big garden there. And we'd eat at 11:30 every day. She wanted, and Granddaddy too, all of us to be there for dinner at noon. And we called noontime dinner time and 6 o'clock in the afternoon supper time.
That's right.
So I showed Granddaddy that bait. And he said, you think that thing will catch a bass? And I said, I think it will. I'm going to sure try it. Well, I had a metal true temper rod and a little old Langley. I was a Shakespeare, a little old, no drag Shakespeare reel. And I filled it with braided line and ran a section, about a 3-foot section of catgut, which we call monofilament today, off the end of it, and tied the jitterbug on it. We finished up, cleaned up, all loaded up, and headed for a lake up the highway. It wasn't very far, about 7 miles toward Tullahoma, Tennessee. It was a lake called Cumberland Springs Lake, a spring-fed body of water. Grandmother spread out a quilt under this big tree where a spring came in. She had on a stringer about 4 cold drinks, and she just dropped them in, double colas, just dropped them in the spring in a big bottle of water. Granddaddy liked to fish for red ears. And I'd always go cut a bunch of horseweed worms, and that or catawba worms were 2 of his favorite baits. and he'd fish on the bottom, and he'd sit under that shade tree. Grandmother would sit there and crochet on a quilt. Well, I took that baiting rod and took off running and went through a bunch of bushes and popped out on this point I had seen before as we drive by. And I took the little rod, kind of false cast it several times, and I looked, and there's 2 bass swimming along about a foot under the surface. Cumberland Springs was a crystal clear body of water being spring fed. There was one bass about a pound and another one about 2.5. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And I said, good gracious. So I took my little old metal rod and went ding, 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 ding. And the reel went whoosh, the bait hit the water. And as soon as that bait hit the water, I could see the fish, and they both stopped, which verified a lot of the things about the anatomy and hearing. My granddaddy taught me how fish hear. And I said, those fish can't see that bait, they heard it. I made a pretty good cast. It landed about 20 feet from them, but they heard it. And I started moving it across the surface of the water, and they both turned in the direction of the bait. And it just fascinated me watching all this. I'd stop the bait and they'd stop. I'd reel the bait, they'd start moving toward the bait. I'd stop, they'd stop. I'd start, they'd start. I'd stop, they'd stop. And he got within about 4 feet of the bait, and I'd stopped it. And they were within eyesight of that bait then. And I just playing with them, I just twitched the bait just a little, didn't pull it, just twitched it. And when I did, they twitched. And I said, they can see that. I'm not making a sound with the bait. I just made an action move, and the bait just kind of, and they stopped. I started the bait up, and this 2.5 pounder shot right into it, turned, came in for a headshot. Fish do that. Most times, if it's possible, they'll hit the front end of a moving object. It's like a bluegill in the water. They're not going to come in and hit him tail first because of the spiny rays, hard raised dorsal fins on the top of a bluegill would get hung in the throat. They come in for a headshot. And I watched that bass. He came in, made a turn, and came straight at the bait. He just blew it right up on a headshot. When he did, of course, I started reeling. And I had about a 20-to-1 ratio reel on the Vanna side, and reeled and reeled and reeled and reeled. Well, he jumped. My heart's just pounding. I reeled a little bit more. Well, this other bass, the pound bass, was right there with him, trying to get the bait from him. And I was experiencing all this. I was thinking, what? This is amazing. I'm fishing a phony, an artificial phony. His bait's made out of plastic. Back then, it was made out of wood. Then they went to plastic. Had a metal lip. And as I reeled it, the action was good. It set up good on the water and everything. And as I got it closer to the boat, this 1 pounder continued to try to come in and get the bait from the bigger bass. Well, I threw the rod down, threw it over my shoulder and grabbed the line. And I just started, I well roped him right up on the bank. And I put the line over my shoulder and just ran up the bank about 20 feet and then turned around and pounced on top of it and got the lure out and made a beeline back through that, some kind of bushes, yucca bushes, or I don't know what they were. But I ran, I was screaming. Grandma said, what's wrong? What's wrong? I said, look what I caught, look what I caught. And she said, Granddad, look what Bill caught. Look what, he caught it on that bug. And I said, no, jitterbug, grandmother. And so anyway, he put it on a chain stringer, And he said, and we're going to keep it. I said, wait. Let me have it. I'm going to put him in the trunk. And he said, he's not going to get away. We didn't have cell phones or a camera then.
Obviously.
It was worth a hoot. But anyway, he put 2 hooks through its mouth and dropped him in the water there by that little running spring. The fish went around. We took the fish home. They had a flash camera. And I stood there, took a picture of it. Still got that picture today. And
I'd love to see that.
What that did, that one thing had a major influence on my direction in life. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I don't know if it'll ever come about. I prayed that it would. Every night, now lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I hope the Lord my soul to take. But if you don't take it, get me in the fishing business some way, Lord. So I rocked along and kind of fast forward. I went through, my parents separated when I was young, and I spent a lot of my young life with my grandmother and granddaddy over in Lynchburg. But my mother lived in Memphis. And so I'd come home. I came home when I was a little bit older. And I went to work for a company, a distributor in Memphis, Stratton Warren Hardware. Well, they sold fishing tackle. They sold fishing line, fishing rods, all kind of lures, and a bigger selection than just Arbogast. And I constantly looked through the hardware book, the salesman's book, and they had me in charge of damaged goods that would come into the company, come back to the company, and reorder and all that. I did that for a short period of time, and I went into Jack Giroux, vice president of Stratton Warren, and I said, Jack, I want a job traveling. I want a hardware route. And he said, well, do you know anything about hardware? I said, no, but I'm willing to learn. We had these big leather-bound cases that we carried. So, but we had a section sporting goods, we had a section farming, we had a section this, that, just anything you nearly wanted. Bolts, plows, points, everything. Well, I did that for a short period of time, and I got married in 1960. Is my wife going to see this?
Not unless you want her to.
Well, I think it was 61, and so anyway, Diane and I were on Pickwick Lake, fishing down the bank, and I was throwing that jitterbug and fishing a plastic worm. And I saw a boat coming across the lake. And in the boat was, I had never met the guy in the middle. Ed House was he was the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. He was in the back of the boat. In front of the boat was a guy by the name of Glenn Andrews. Best bass fisherman I ever met in my life. Had just an uncanny ability to catch fish in deep water. And so they pulled up. And Ed said, hey, Bill, you know Glenn, don't you? And I said, good gracious, Glenn, I hadn't seen you since the boat show in Memphis. He said, yeah, it's been a while. And then said, this is Ray Scott. I said, Ray, I got a letter from you about a tournament you're going to hold on Beaver Lake in northwest Arkansas. He said, yeah, I sent you one. I sure hope you can participate. And I said, well, I'm going to do my best to be there. And we talked there a few minutes. Glenn said, you know, this right up here at the end of that bank you're fishing, that point, it's a channel. It's a channel point. I said, what's a channel point? He said, where the channel comes in and turns out off of it. And it crosses this pocket and goes over there and hits that one. There's another channel point. And I said, have you ever fished this lake before, Glenn? He said, no. He said, but we just kind of idled over it and checked it out and idled over that other point. But we went on up the lake toward Dry Creek. You know where that is? And I said, yeah. He said, you know where the first point is in on the right past Rock Bluff? And I said, yeah. He said, we caught a couple of 6-pounders, a couple of 4s, caught about a dozen bass this morning off that point. And I said, well, that point's pretty deep. He said, well, they were about 22 feet deep. And I said, what? He said, they were about 22. I said, you caught bass 22 feet deep? Well, I grew up fishing oxbow lakes. And if I got over 6 feet deep, I was fishing the ocean. All my fishing was basically shallow water. And he said, yeah, they were about 20, 21, 23, 22 feet. And I said, well, what'd you catch them on? He said, plastic worm. He said, how heavy a sinker you got on? I said, 3/16. He said, put you a 3/8 on. So I looked at my box and I had 3 of them because I never used them. I didn't need to, that heavy a weight. He said, pull out there and make a cast toward the lock on the dam, TVA dam at Pickwick, and see what happens. We've got a couple of things to do, and we're going to have breakfast down at the motel below the dam. You want to have breakfast with us? And I said, how about it, Danny? And she said, that's fine. So I said, I'll meet y'all down there in about an hour. He said, fine. I got up there, put that 3/8 sinker on, and this was the big change. The jitterbug got me going, but the deep water really set me going, and it just made a major difference in my career. But I threw that thing, it hit. I said in 2010, in 2012, in 2017, 2020, 2000, boop, and it hit the bottom, right at 22 feet. Bait falling about a foot per second. I said, I have never in my life, I didn't know a bass could live in 22 feet of water. And I pulled it about 2 times and it went, and I went, oh, that's a fish, can't believe it. Pop, set the hook, fought him, got him up, it was about a 2-pounder. I pulled him up out of the water and I said, Diane, do you see what your husband just did? And she said, yeah, you caught a bass. I said, no, I caught a bass 22 feet deep. Do you realize what I just did? She said, yeah, you caught a bass 22 feet. I said, I can't believe that. And just thoughts started flashing through my head right and left. Beaver Lake's a deep lake. It's a highland lake. It's deep water. I'm going to start fishing tournaments. I've got to learn how to change the way I fish. I've got to learn how to fish deep water. And I threw back and caught another one, threw back and missed one. And I said, let's go. But I was just shaking. I was so excited that everybody I knew fished shallow water, except one person, Glenn. And I called Glenn every night and talked to him about deep water. And he said, well, you need to get you a contour map. I said, what? A contour map or a TVA map, but get it with the smallest intervals possible. And I said, what's an interval? And he said, well, they're break lines that go out to deeper water or they reverse and they come up to shallower type water. But you want to look for tight lines where those lines are real tight because that's where you've got a drop off for deeper water. So I'm making notes. He said, I'll order you a map. Well, he ordered me a map, and the map I got, it was from TVA. It showed, it went down to 5-foot intervals, which showed a whole lot more than a 10 or 20-foot interval, with 2.5-foot auxiliary interval. Well, I'm looking at this map and I'm saying, oh, good night. Look, right there's a good spot. Move, right there's a good spot. I was counting the lines back, subtracting, add. And I bought a little old depth finder made by Sonar. It was Sonar, but it was made by Sonar also. I didn't know how to read it, but I could read the depth of it. And put it on my boat. And started spending a lot of time fishing deep water at Pickwick, and could not believe the results that I had. And so fast forward, the tournament came along, and I remember Glenn said, don't worry about catching fish this first day of practice. Just idle down the banks till you see something unusual. Just because it reaches the water doesn't mean it's going to stop. A bluff will drop. You might find some irregular feature along a bluff. You need to idle, spend a half day idling looking. And then you could go back and you can dummy hook that worm the way you do where they won't get hooked. Well, I went back in the cove where the marina was, Murray Creek Marina. And that's where the tournament site was. Right across from the area where the takeoff would be was a cove. And that first day of practice, I did what Glenn said. I went in this cove and went right down the middle of it. It was timbered bluff. It was timbered on both sides. And all of a sudden I looked to the right, and there was a pathway through this timber that led right up on the bank. And I said, what is that? And I started kind of thinking, I said, it's an old logging road. That's what it is. And I looked over to the other side. You could see where it came out. So spun around, put a blue flip tail worm on, and a 1/4-ounce sinker of 3/8 whatever. And I threw it up there. And I counted it. And where I hit, it went down 17 feet. And I moved it. Boom. Fish hit it. Set the hook. Caught him. Got a 2-pounder. Took him off. Hooked up. Threw right back. Another one hit it. I set the hook. He got off. I reeled the worm in. When I was reeling the worm in, another one grabbed it. And I caught him. And I said, I'm going to make one more cast. So I put my dummy hook on. And I threw it. I had a hit. And he just pulled the rod tip down, pulled the worm free. And I said, boy, this is a good spot. 3 casts, 3 fish. So I moved along. I got along the edge of a bluff. It was about 60 feet of water. Because Beavers, it's a highland type reservoir. Idling down right up against the bluff. And I was in 60 feet. And all of a sudden, it jumped up to 19. And I went for about 20 yards, and doop, it went right back off to 60. And I said, what could that be? I dropped trolling motor to ease back up there, and it was just a shelf that came off that bluff. So I spun around, I threw the worm. It went down. It hit that 19-foot spot. Point, a bass. I said, oh, this is the way to fish. This is a new way to fish for Bill Dance. Depending on the lake, like Seminole, basically it'd be a shallow pattern. Lake Eufaula would be both a shallow and a deep pattern. But Highland lakes were basically, except in the spring, were all deep water lakes. Well, the first day of the tournament, I was in first place. And second day, second place. First place. And the third day, Stan Sloan out of Nashville beat me. about a pound and a half. So I finished second in that first tournament. Later, we went to Smith Lake in Alabama. And that's another one of those hot, deep lakes. First day of practice, I'm running down, I found a pocket, and I looked out in the lake, and I saw some fish schooling. And I just spun around, and I just idled out toward them. And I looked and I said, good night, look at all those. That's got to be a treetop. It was 50 feet deep, 49, 50, 51 feet deep. And I said, I looked at it real close. I put a Dixie Jet spoon on, half ounce, the best jigging spoon I ever fished. And I got right over those trees, and I let it go deep down. And I felt it hit something. It had a big O-ring on the front, and a big O-ring on the back where the treble hooks were. And you just shake it, and poof, it popped off. And I said, hey, that's a tree or something. And then, pow, one hit it. I spotted Kentucky bass, and a good one, too. And I got him up to the top of the water. I said, good night. Unhooked him, dropped him back in real quick, dropped back down, jigged it again. Doink, another one hit it. Another nice one, about the same size. And I said, this is gonna be one good spot. I only had 3 Dixie Jet spoons. So, as it would have it, first day of the tournament, I was in second, third place. And end of the tournament, I won it. But I won it fishing 50 feet deep. And I found 4 of those trees out there, and all of them had Kentucky bass in them. And I caught a limit. And Alabama's limit then was 15. Well, I went on to Rayburn, then back to Ross Barnett, and I won 3 tournaments in a row. And I got a phone call within the next 10 days from Ken White with Head and Lure Company, Nick Cream with Cream Lure Company, and Jim Bagley with Bagley Bait Company in Winter Haven, Florida. And they had all offered me a job. And the one that Nick was a great guy. Nick offered me a job, and asked for Diane and I to fly down to Tyler, Texas. So we flew to Shreveport, and Nick picked us up. And we went back to the Cream Lure Company. We met his wife, Cosma. She was there. And she and Diane went off shopping. And Nick started telling me about what he makes and what he'd like me to promote and talk about. So I went to work for Nick, and he would send in writers, mom and pop buyers, and one big chain in Texas called the Oshman chain. He brought me into that, and I would take these people out and fish them for a day or 2 days, bring them back in, they'd leave, and I'd go like to Toledo Bend. I'd stay down there about a week, 10 days, and fish with 4 or 5 writers, mom and pops, or anybody. We didn't have Walmarts, like I say, back then, or Bass Pro Shops. So I did that for a period of time for Nick and continued to fish the tournaments. And as luck would have it, it did exceptionally well. But the majority of those tournaments that I won or placed high in, I think the first 10 tournaments that I fished for Ray, I won 3 of them and was in the top 7, and the other 7. And I look back to the reservoirs, the way I fished, and I was kind of on the verge of really getting into this, helping Nick design stuff, design baits, fishing baits. We designed a worm pack that we sold a blue billion of. 6 worms, 3 hooks, and 3 slip sinkers. And I don't know how many we sold. It was astronomical. Well, I got to thinking after a couple of years working for Nick, he doubled my salary, gave me a company car, and just wanted me to fish. That's all he wanted me to do.
There you go. There, dreams do come true.
yeah.
Yep, dreams do come true.
Oh, yeah, it was all coming together. Then I had our local newspaper said, "Can you write an article for us once a week in the Sunday paper?" I said, "Yeah." Went on. But anyway, I started writing how-to articles for our local newspaper. Then our NBC affiliate, I went to. I started doing a Friday night, Thursday or Friday night fishing report, and then I met writers, and the tournaments were really coming on. I was doing exceptionally well in those, and trying to stay ahead of myself here a little bit. But anyway, the tournaments were a success. What I was doing was a success. And then Charles Spence bought Strike King Lure Company. Didn't even have a name, but he bought the ladle and the baits from a fellow named Bill McEwen here in Memphis. And we put a name on the bait. He paid $1,500 for a big box of safety pins. Because spinnerbaits used to be made with a safety pin. And a box of skirts, some lead, a ladle, hot pot, and we started pouring baits. And we had a Pache spray gun and started spraying them. Well, Charles said, "I want you to do something. I want you to give me $750. I said, "What?" He said, "Give me $750 because I want you to own half of Strike King." We had named it by then. The word Strike King, a lot of people didn't know that, but what do fish do when they hit a bait? They're striking. They're striking the bait. So we went with the name Strike King. So kind of put Strike and King together. It's called Strike King.
Killer brand name, by the way.
Yeah, it
Killer
really
brand
is.
name.
That's some smart.
Got some marketing in there, for sure.
Started piddling around, and I called Cotton Cordell one day, and just talking to Cotton. He says, "Well, your fishing days are about over with, aren't they? You might be in that lure business." And I said, "No, I'm not anymore." He said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Just fishing and taking people fishing, riders and so forth." He said, "What are you doing Monday morning?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "You come to Hot Springs. I want to talk to you." Well, I went to Hot Springs, and Cotton offered me a job, making twice as much as I was making. He wanted me to continue fishing tournaments. He wanted me to continue fishing with riders, mom and pops promoting his line of baits. And I did. But I remember something Nick told me. He said, "You'll move on, and if it doesn't work out, Bill, you see that door?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "It swings both ways. You can come back. You come back if it doesn't work out for you. And if I can help you, I will." Nick and Kyles McCrean were just the greatest people on earth. And so was Cotton. And so was Charles. But I went over and talked to Cotton. He said, "Hey, what I'm going to do, we'll get you, you pick a vehicle you want, and what boat are you running? I said, I'm running Ranger. And he said, okay, that's fine. I was thinking about making a boat one day. And I said, well, okay. After a short period of time, he called me one night and he said, hey, got an idea. I said, what's that, Cotton? And he said, we need to do a TV show. I said, okay. And I said, are you going to do it? He said, no, I got somebody else in mind. I said, let me tell you, Jerry McInnes. I knew Jerry and I roomed together at the tournaments, and Jerry, I'd go with Jerry on film trips and stuff. And he had a scooping camera. It was very easy to use. You just pick it up and had an automatic focus. You were shooting film then, not tape. And he said, no, Jerry does a good show, but I've got somebody else in mind. I said, who could that be? He said, you. And I went, like a cat spitting up a hairball. I went, what? And he said, you. I said, cut. I can't. The biggest two words I know is mayonnaise and Chevrolet, and I can't spell either one of them. I know I can't spell television. He said, well, you better learn. And I said, I don't know if this will work. He said, it'll work. We just got get you a station in Memphis that'll air it. Well, I went to the CBS affiliate. Nah. I went to the head man, Al Michael, at the NBC affiliate. Nope, there's no market for that. I came home kind of depressed. Diane said, what about in ABC? Aren't they sports minded? And I said, yeah. Did you talk to them? That was Channel 13. I went over there, got my little coat and tie on, went over there. And that's all I owned was one tie and one coat. But I went over there, walked in. Elizabeth, she's the switchboard operator. I said, I want to see your program director. She said, well, that's Lance Russell. I said, Lance Russell? He does wrestling on the weekend? Announces wrestling? No. She said, yeah. I said, they're at lunch, though, Bill. It's 10 or 12. I didn't even time my time. She said, they usually get back about 2. I said, well, I'll just wait on them. Well, I started talking to Elizabeth and telling her what I had in mind. She thought it was a great idea. And she thought WHBQ was a place to put it. And she went and got her a Coke, got me a Coke, and cheese crackers, and we sat there and just got along great, had a great conversation. And found out that Lance was already back. And he'd come up the back way and come down the hall to his office. And she said, Bill, he's back. Let me call. She called him. He said, come right up. He's the third door on the right. I went up these green carpet steps, turned, went down the hall, the third door. He jumped up and met me halfway when I came to the door. He said, Bill, how are you, buddy? Good to see you. And shook my hand. He said, what can I do for you? He said, let's sit down right here. And he jerked a chair up. He said, pull that chair up. I said, what can I do? What do you got on your mind? I said, I want to do a local fishing show in the Memphis market. And I want to make it educational. I want to talk about why certain baits produce at this time of the year, summer, fall, winter, spring, cold water, hot water, muddy water, clear water. What's the difference in a highland lake to a lowland lake? How do you approach these lakes to fish throughout the seasons? And talk about local fishing, conservation issues, environmental issues, and have key guests on the show and give a fishing report once a week. He said, I like it. I really like the idea. You know, I used to do a fishing show at WBBJ in Jackson, Tennessee. I said, you did? He said, yeah. He said, I think we could do it. But what we need first we need a pilot. I said, wait a minute. I don't even have a plane. He said, he put his head there, he said, you got a lot to learn. The pilot is you go out, shoot a show, make it the best you can, edit it right, and let me see it to show potential sponsors. And we need to find a good time slot on either Thursday night or Friday night, right after the news. Got you. Well, it was a big store in Memphis called Surplus City.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous Surplus City. And I left WCQ and I headed right there. And Billy Woods was the manager. I walked in and I said, Billy, I got an idea. He said, let me hear it. I said, I may start a show, a fishing show on Channel 13. He said, really? I said, yeah, really. I'm serious. He said, you know, and I said, just bottom line, I need a sponsor. He said, you're not going to believe this, but Sig was in about 3 days ago, Sig Swartz. He owned Fabulous Surplus City. And he said, I think he would love the idea to sponsor a Bill Dance show. Bill Dance, Outdoors with Bill Dance. That's what I first started calling it. And I realized they wouldn't put Bill Dance. They just started putting outdoors. And I found out why. Outdoors with Bill Dance took up too much space. And I said, okay, change it to Bill Dance Outdoors. And people could recognize that better, just outdoors. You know, if they're talking about how to plant a garden or trim a hedge, but they did. And I took Billy and he said, are you talking, you've been talking to Lance Russell? I said, yeah. Do you know who Lance Russell is? And I said, yeah. He said, Lance Russell, I love it, Lance Russell. But he has wrestling every week. And hey, he does a great, I can't believe you know him. I said, well, you're going to know him here in a few minutes. You got to be kidding me. Yeah, Lance Russell. Lance Russell, you're going to. Got up, walked in, Elizabeth was still there. She rang, come upstairs, come on. Went back up. Lance's office, walked in, sealed the deal. Fabulous Surplus City, 2526 Elvis Presley Boulevard. Wow. Became the sponsor for Bill Dance Outdoors. Their sister station, another ABC affiliate, Channel 16 in Jackson, Mississippi, wanted me to come down and do a show for them. WBRZ, Channel 2 in Baton Rouge.
That's my uncle.
I do one for them.
Is it?
Yeah.
Back then, J.C. Penney was getting in the sporting good business. And they called and wanted me to do one for them. Well, I was doing 4 markets. 4 markets, 52 weeks a year. That's 208 shows. Mm. And I was running up and down Highway 51, 55 South. I don't even know if 55 was built then, but anyway, running to Jackson, taking 4 shows, on to Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge was the capital. Jackson was the capital. So I had drawing power from Mississippi. The governor liked to fish. Boating safety was there. I could pull guests from there, and I knew quite a few local fishermen from that I had met at tournaments and met at Ross Barnett too. So I went to Baton Rouge, and it was about the same thing. We rocked along for several years with that. I gave my show away to Bobby Meadows in Baton Rouge and Ernest Neal and Jackson. I kept Memphis for a short period of time. Advancers in St. Louis said, would you be interested in syndicating Bill Dance Outdoors. And I said, yeah. What is it? Well, we syndicated 50 and then very quickly 90 network markets.
Wow.
Well, the cost of syndication started rising. It was high. And cable was coming on strong. And we've left the syndication. Don Stork in St. Louis went to work with ESPN. Now, back then, ESPN, they didn't have anything like fishing, but we started and we were everywhere. From Spokane to San Diego to Phoenix to Santa Fe to Dallas to Baton Rouge to Miami, to Tallahassee to New York to all through the Midwest to the Southeast. We were every market that ESPN covered. And we rocked along there and we picked up NBC Sports, and we picked up the Outdoor Channel, and we picked up the Sportsman Channel. Yeah, Outdoor Channel, Sportsman Channel. So we were running on 4 networks, and we did that for a while, for a year or two, and we found out our key markets, demographically, we hit a home run demographically with the Outdoor Channel and the Sportsman Channel. I got ahead of them. Right in the mix of that was a little network over at Nashville called TNN.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we jumped over to TNN. They gave us demographics were perfect. I picked up some big sponsors. Picked up Walmart, picked up Chevrolet, picked up Purina, and they had bull riding, NASCAR, everything for a bee market. The demographics were just perfect.
Little hunting too.
And
Hunt the country.
Yeah.
Not at first, but we did.
Yeah,
we were there
eventually.
not long after.
Yeah.
What year was
Yeah.
that when you were on TNN? What would you guess?
that was probably in the 80s,
Yeah, late '80s. I was
early to mid 80s. And
wow.
I was there 15 years.
Yep.
And somebody came in and bought Gaylord Enterprises, TNN, and it went south.
It did. Viacom.
Yeah.
Spike.
And,
Spike.
then
Network,
the NBC Sports
Versus.
or NBC picked it up.
Yep.
Yeah, Versus, that's right.
NBC Sports, Discovery Channel, the other 2 that we're on now.
All right. Sportsman.
Sportsman.
Yep.
But so that's where we are today.
Yep.
That's
It's
kind of a fast pace from the creek, Mulberry Creek, up through. Kind of left out a lot of things, but I got you
No.
to where.
I
No.
love
you asked
hearing
me
that.
about 3 hours ago.
The Mulberry Creek part of that story is special, and catching that bass on the jitterbug and running to his grandmother. I would just that's some priceless.
You know, I've heard him talk about bits and pieces of that, but it was just, I wrote the word down. What an honor to just sit here and listen to the whole thing. And I think it's important, you know, for people to be able to listen to that and see how that unfolded, because it's history. It was history in the making all the way through.
I got a notice the other day, about a month ago. We called that bridge that went over Mulberry Creek, we called it the Stone Bridge. Well, the Stone Bridge has got a facelift now, and it sits right there beside Jack Daniel's Distillery. You know, you walk across from the parking lot, you walk across that bridge.
Wow.
Well, I got a call, and it's gone through the Senate, it's gone through the House,
Oh, no.
and the only thing left is for Governor Lee to sign off on it. They go to October the 1st, they're going to name that bridge the Bill Dance Bridge.
No, man.
Wow.
Yeah, hit the horn.
I knew that was coming.
How about that?
Of course they should.
Yeah. Hey, look, let's do this. I should have done this at the very beginning. Let Dudley ask his rapid fire questions, and Mr. Bill, he'll ask you these questions. He'll just want a quick answer, but we'll get to these will be some really interesting insight into you as a person here. Rapid fire, Lanny, is brought to us by our friends at
Nutrient Ag Solutions.
Yeah, they
That's
are.
right.
Yeah, great guys.
All right, Mr. Bill. So we do this with every guest every week just to try to get to know you better. Some of these questions are kind of dumb and funny, but we're going to get through this. So just try to answer.
No such thing as a dumb question, Dudley.
I don't know. You
Just
hadn't
try
heard
to
something.
just try to answer them quick. Okay.
Okay, move it.
All right. Bananas in the boat. Don't care or absolutely not.
That's a psychological thing. You have people that believe it, and a lot of people don't. I've got mixed emotions about it. My camera crew, if I've got a banana, they take it and throw it out in the lake.
I think that's I think that's more of a saltwater thing, but it's fun to ask. All right.
It is. I was going to say charter boat captains, no bananas on this boat.
All right. Question number 2. Name an all-time favorite hole-in-the-wall gas station, country store, lunch spot.
Ooh.
That would be dinner, actually.
Yeah, dinner.
There's one about 2.5 miles from here. A guy by the name of Charlie Burgess started the Rendezvous barbecue place here in Memphis.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he taught these boys about 2.5 miles down the road how to smoke hams. And they sell hams all over the place. And they make, on a good day with the construction going on out this part of Shelby County, they'll sell 1,250 sandwiches. Wow. On an excellent day, they'll sell 2,000.
Wow.
Contractors come in and say, give me 50 ham sandwiches. Yes, sir. And they usually have them made up and ready to go. That little store, Johnny Morris and I drove by it one day, and I said, smell that ham? He said, ham. Let's stop it and sit there and make a ham. I said, they do make ham. Let's get one. We got it. He said, it's the best ham sandwich I ever ate, Bill. It's the best one I've ever ate. He'll pick me up like Sunday. We're going to Florida next Sunday to shoot 3 days a tarpon show or a snook show. And he said, I talked to him just 15 minutes before I got online with you, and he said, is that little store open? And I said, no, not on Sundays. He said, I said, why? He said, I want you to give me one of those ham sandwiches. Well, I send him one of those hams every Christmas.
Okay.
And they're the best smoked ham. But this is kind of a hangout. Everybody out here in the country around where we all meet down there.
What's the name of that place?
It was called Canale's Grocery.
Okay.
Now it's called, the Canale boys passed away, and now it's called Home of the Hams.
Okay.
And they make a Cracker Jack at noon. The place is packed. And there's people in there getting sandwiches. So what I'm going to do Saturday, I'm going to go down there and get about a pound of it, wrap it up real tight and put it in an ice box, get a loaf of bread and some mayonnaise, and I'm going to meet him down here at the little FBO at Olive Branch, Mississippi, and we're going to fly down there on his plane. Thank you. And he said, you want me to pick you up Sunday? Are you going down Sunday? I said, yeah. He said, why don't I just come by and pick you up? And I said, oh, I don't want to put you in a lot of trouble. I'll pick you up. I'll have Debbie call you and tell you what time. I said, great, thank you. I love to travel with Johnny.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
I bet.
That's a
Yeah.
ham sandwich.
And
is a
I
good
bet
ticket price.
I bet y'all have had a lot of ham sandwiches in the boat. So that's
Home of the hams.
yeah. All right. So Next question, real quick. What was the first vehicle you owned when you were a new driver?
You ain't gonna believe this, but I'm gonna tell you. An old man that lived up the street had a car, and he needed some money real bad. And he sold me his car. And I drove that thing for about 2 months, and I got out of it as quick as I could. But it was a Nash Rambler.
Okay.
How about that?
Another funny random question. Have you ever seen a UFO when you're fishing? Yes or no?
I thought I did one time. I was on Enid Reservoir, just south of Memphis.
Yep.
And we saw something way up toward the end of the lake and had a light. You could see it, but you couldn't hear it. And Joe said, "You know what that is?" I said, "What?" He said, "That's a UFO. Look at it. Look, it backs up, then it goes up, then it comes down, then it goes to the right." And I said, "I'm going to get over toward the bank." And he said, "Why?" I said, "I don't want him to zoot down and pull me up in it." And we were so dumb. We got over to the bank, got out of the boat and sat in the woods and watched it. And then all of a sudden, here it comes straight at us and went right over us, and it was a helicopter. That scared me to death. It really did.
What is the coldest temperature you've ever been in while you were out fishing?
It was on Table Rock Lake in 1974. The high, the first day of the tournament, was 28. And we didn't have the apparel that we have today. And it was cold. My hands got so cold I couldn't even undo my zipper. So I just wet my pants. But anyway, I was catching fish on a spinnerbait beside cedar bushes on timbered bluffs. I'd throw the spinnerbait and let it free fall, and those fish would come out of that dead cedar and grab that bait on the fall. And I won that tournament, and Roland finished second. We roomed together. We were rooming together at that time. And he saw this little old guy walking up the ramp in a jumpsuit. He said, "Who's that dumpy little guy?" And I said, "That dumpy little guy ain't a little guy. That dumpy little thing is a girl, and she ain't dumpy." He said, "That ain't no girl." I said, "It is a girl." And I said, "Marianne, come here a minute." She turned and looked. She came over. She pulled the hood off her head, and she was a good-looking, pretty girl. And Roland went, I said, "This is Roland Martin." "Hi, Roland, how are you?" And she left. She said, "I'll catch y'all later." I said, "Are you staying here?" She said, "Yeah." And we had cabins in that tournament. And Roland and I had about 10 space heaters all everywhere we could plug one in. It was so cold in the rooms. I'll never forget it. But I told him, I said, "You just keep talking about that girl. Why don't you go over there and knock on the cabin door and ask her would she like to go over to Kimberly City and drink a Coke or have a sandwich?" I don't think she'd go, but I'll try it. Well, she went. And he came back and he said, "She's going to go. She's going to go." I can't believe it. I just asked her would she like. She said she'd love to. Well, 1 o'clock came in the morning, and I looked at the clock. I went, "Good night. You're not going to get any sleep." And I knew if I had to beat anybody in that tournament, I had to beat him. And I was second and he was third. Somebody, I can't remember who was first going into the last day. But that morning, I took the clock and I turned it. An hour and a half later, it wasn't 1 o'clock. I set it to 2:30. He comes in. He said, boy, I had the greatest time. She is so much fun. We sat there and talked, and then got in the car and sat there and talked, and got burned up a tank of gas with the heater running. He said, I said, Roland, you better get to bed because we got to get up pretty quick. So he said, what time are we getting up? I said, well, we need to get up about 4:30 or 5. He said, you got the clock set? And I said, oh, yeah, I got the clock set. So clock went off. He jumped out of bed. He said, good night. I feel like I just got in bed. And I said, you did. And but I didn't tell him. The next night I did the same thing. And he was walking around half asleep. He just, well, it was a dirty trick I played on him, but he said, the only thing that kept me going was that cold weather. So the last day of the tournament, the pattern still held true for me. And spinnerbait, sometimes I could go back to the same tree and catch 2 more bass out of it. But the final day, I was first and he was second. And I think the sleepless nights is what helped me win that tournament. That was the best pattern.
That's great. Well,
I may borrow that from you next turkey season.
I was thinking
with
the
Bobby.
same
Yeah,
thing. I was thinking the same
it's a
thing.
great idea.
Oh my goodness.
all right, and last but not least, I'm gonna cut this a little short. What is the weirdest bait you've ever used or seen someone use to catch a fish? Like if you ever just put something on the hook thinking it was crazy or trying to just be funny and caught something on it.
Well, I've seen a lot of people that I fished with back there in the early days. They'd look and say, you think they'd hit this, Bill? And I said, nah, I don't think so. Why don't you put on a worm? I have a little trouble fishing a worm. I think I'll try this. Bang, fish, bang, fish, bang, fish. You'd have 3 or 4 fish caught on that goofy thing, whatever the bait was. It wouldn't be a bait that I'd ever use. And that happened to me about 2 or 3 times. And I learned one other thing about a bait or where to throw it. 2 times I was in a tournament fishing objects, bushes. And Brother John Banks, a minister from Lake Darbon in Louisiana, I was catching my fish on a mud bug, and I was really front-ended him pretty good, you know, but I felt kind of bad. And I said, John, hit that bush right there and I'll get this one on the left. And he said, oh, that looks good. We would threw it out. Oh, he caught an 8.5 pounder. Had the biggest bass and won a boat. And I said, I ain't never going to do this again. Well, it wasn't long. I did it again. The same thing, basically the same thing happened. But those were 2 times that I learned the lesson. I ain't going to tell anybody where to throw anymore. Go on your own.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, that's a good question, Studley.
Yeah, and when people ask what you're fishing with, and you don't want to tell them,
Yeah.
you just got to tell them you're fishing with green-eyed grasshoppers.
There you go. Those are always biting.
Yeah, crickets. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Bill, would you? So, like, if a guy's listening to this and he's got a little farm pond or something that he's trying to manage to catch bigger bass, are there what are a few things a guy can do to help improve his own pond that he's got himself?
Well, the runoff helps a lot. Wherever the lake is positioned, it gets good runoff and a flow through. That's good. If he doesn't, aeration could help the lake tremendously. It helps everything in the lake. All the crustaceans, the phytoplankton, the zooplankton, everything in the lake. High oxygen. The next thing would be don't overstock it, but go with a fast growing fish. I just put some F1s in my lake, and the F1s through a genetic process. They are an F1, but they're referred to as a type, and they grow 35% faster than a standard F1. So the growth rate on these fish, I put them in there just a little over 2 years ago. And last week, Troy Goldsby came up, shot the lake, and they shot them up to 6 pounds. So the growth rate from 6 inches to 6 pounds, just a little over 2 years is considered fast growth, I think.
Very. Yep.
I would get some knowledgeable person. Troy's smart as a whip.
Yeah, we've had Troy on here.
Yeah, he's a Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous
Yeah.
fish biologist too. The
Impressive.
people, yeah, he does a great job.
I know he's going to suggest bluegill, but bluegill and then shad, and that's good because the shad take the pressure off the bluegill, and the bluegill take the pressure off the shad. And but the shad rate about 40% protein, and bluegill rate around 16%.
So have you? I'm sure you have, but I'd love for you to kind of walk through the experience of creating a pond, but then building all the structure in it before it's flooded. Is that worth all the effort that it looks like it would take? Does that pay off?
Absolutely, it does. First of all, you've got to pick a site where there's not a lot of sand. You've got more of a clay base. You got to look at your runoff. 3-to-1 is good. 6-to-1 is ideal, but 3-to-1 is still adequate. The runoff that goes into the pond or the lake. I guess you know the difference in a pond and a lake.
I'd love for you to tell us.
Whether you're buying or selling. so you take that body of water and you run soil samples. Will it hold water? That's the biggest problem people have. These smaller type lakes, bodies of water, ponds, they go in and they dig them, but they have major seepage problems. But if you have a sample of soil and see if that area will hold water, like a marl base or clay base, is much better than a sand. You'll go crazy keeping the lake at a normal elevation. You've got to consider the amount of trees around the lake. Sunshine is great, but it absorbs water. Transformation through timber close to the lake is going to draw water. And if you've got seepage, it's going to draw a tremendous amount of water. Then you got to put a well in. And then if you're on commercial rate with that well, it's going to cost you a fortune. Even residential, it's not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than commercial.
So is it in today's world, is there an application process that you've got to go through? If you wanted to build a pond somewhere, do you have to get approval? Is it harder today than it used to be? Can you?
Yeah, it really is. I think it is. I know a lot of lakes that were built that didn't get approval. I'm not going to tell you which ones are, but they did not get approval. But they're great lakes today. But to go through all the hassle of getting a permit, it's a job. Yeah. Sometimes it depends on who you're dealing with or who you know. Can help you tremendously with that.
So, so as we move on, so I wanted to ask. We've got a bunch of. We've all written down some questions, but I wanted just to get you just to say whether you preferred smallmouth or largemouth and why.
Well, I think smallmouth. I grew up fishing smallmouth, small ones, in the creeks and the creeks over Middle Tennessee. I still go back to a lot of them, even now, and float them. and where they have populations of smallmouth. We don't have the smallmouth populations in a lot of our small creeks is because of the otter population. They're horrible. I mean, they're absolutely a nightmare.
Wow.
And if you've got a pond and there's a water source, that an otter will travel a mile to a food source. And I've heard horror stories. People, they go in, they usually eat the biggest fish first. We've had a problem on my lake. We trapped 7, 11, and 28 beaver this past year. And I think we cured our otter problem for a while. I hope so. But the that's the main thing I would think about. I'll tell you what they do. They'll travel a mile and a half to a food source. I know they'll do that.
Oh yeah. Bill, Barry Smith always said if you were trying to grow trophy bass, you needed to fence your lake to keep
That's wild.
to keep otters out of it.
They'll find it.
Yeah,
They'll find it.
they will.
Barry told you right.
Yeah.
Most folks know this, but if you're trying to identify whether you've got otters in your lake, you can look at the little runs, below the dam, and you'll see fish scales
That's right.
in there with their poop, whereas you obviously won't with beavers.
That's right.
But it'll all be the same place. Where they eat, they go to the bathroom in the same place. And you can walk your pond, and you can find, if you've got otter, it'll show those signs of fish scales all ground up. It looks like fish was put in a blender, and it's a little pile of that. That's their bathroom. And you'll find
we hear stories all the time.
No, I
about
say that's
otters.
that's what they eat. They grind it up and they regurgitate the scales, and then they poop right there close to it. But they do it day in and day out, and it's not hard to figure out. A run sometimes won't tell you that that's an otter. It could be a muskrat.
Beaver.
Good point.
Nutria.
Yeah. So am I reading? Are you more of a fan of smallmouth than largemouth? But just because you
To get
grew up,
back to your question, yes, smallmouth. I put them on a pedestal. They're harder to catch, and places like where we fish, Dale Hollow Lake in Tennessee is a tremendous smallmouth fishery. The Tennessee River at Pickwick, above and below, is coming back with good numbers of in tournaments, good numbers of smallmouth showing up, and I mean sizable smallmouth, 5, 6, 7 pound fish. We've caught them as far as 30 miles below a Pickwick tail race. Numbers in Kentucky Lake have rebounded big. So the smallmouth, Tennessee Wildlife has done a fabulous job on the stocking of smallmouth, and I just put them on a pedestal.
they are fantastic.
They're
So
beautiful fish.
I mean, their will to live is just unbelievable.
Yeah,
They
I was
chill,
thinking when you asked him
fight,
that, smallmouth, largemouth, I was like, okay, what's a comparable question? Do you like pretty girls or beautiful girls? I love them both.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lanny, you got a question?
I do, and I'm going back to a little bit of fishing here. And I think the answer is probably going to be like a lot of questions I ask. It depends, but on an average clarity conditions in an average lake, what would be your go-to worm color?
There we go.
Well, first of all, the clearer the water, a worm is an eye contact bait.
Yes, sir.
A jig and plastic combination is an eye contact bait. The clearer the water, the better they can see it. However, you've got to consider a bass's eye receives 5 times more light than that of the human eye. So where you can see 2 feet in the water, he can see 10 feet in the water. A crappie's the same way. Excellent vision. The clarity of the water kind of turns me off a little bit, but if I can see 2 to 3 feet I'm okay with it. That's clear to me, but not like Minnetonka or one of the lakes up in Minnesota where they can see 25, or Lake Washita over in Arkansas, a mountain lake where you can see 25, 30 feet deep. Um, I like a little color in the water, not too much plankton, but where I can see 2 to 3 feet deep, because I know a fish can see the bait considerably further. But if you get in a muddy water situation, you can still catch fish, but with vibrating type baits. Fish are thicmotactic. And that term is they're touch sensitive. I have about a 900-gallon tank in the barn. And I used to try to move fish back and forth. And I could take a 1-pound bass and throw him in that 900-gallon tank and watch him. And he'd swim around the edge of it all the way around. But I could drop a brick in it, and in a minute, he was right up beside that brick, getting close to something. I threw 2 bass in there, and they both swam side by side. The reason they're not that hard to catch in a muddy environment is because they go shallow. Why? They can see better in shallow water than they can in deep muddy water. Another reason, there's brush there, and they get up against it because of the thicmotactic, touch-sensitive part of their habit. But you can catch them. I've got one lake that I fished, and I can tell you it would take 3 to 5 casts throwing at an object. And my best bait has been a black 3/8 ounce spinnerbait. Black because it holds its identity considerably better underwater than most shades or most colors. And a 5 Hildebrandt silver Colorado blade. Why silver? It reflects more. It's not going to reflect a lot in muddy water, but you might use clear water, a little bit lightly stained water. But the vibration that 5 puts out, just slow fishing, just slow rolling. You need to create a path. Like you throw on the right side of that bush, and you or that stump, you reel it by it real slow, go right back. And if that fish is close to that object, if there's a little wind blowing, he'll get tight to the object. If there's no wind, he'll get on the drip line, or well, that's on a tree, but he'll get out to the edge of the height of that bush as far out as the root systems grow. So if it's not windy, I would make a series of casts on the right side of it and repeated casts. I've thrown 5 times at one bush and bang, I catch him. And what they do, their hearing is, they have a tremendous way to hear. They have an inner ear and they have a lateral line. And the lateral line serves as like a sounding board. They can detect movement in water, but they've got to see it to hit it. I mean, I can smell a steak cooking, I can hear it cooking, but I got to see it to eat it. So as that spinnerbait comes by real slow, but that blade will hold that 3/8 ounce bait up pretty good. You could go to a quarter, but sometimes the 5 blade will roll a 1/4 ounce size spinnerbait. So I go to a 3/8 and sometimes even a half, but I'll roll it right by, back cast again, do the same thing on the left-hand side of the bush. Sardis Reservoir, just south of Memphis, is in the spring of the year when it floods out. You could go back in these fields where these bass, if you find a little ditch or something that meanders back off the cove, the water's, I mean, it's chocolate milk, but you can take that bait and throw it. I was paired with Larry Nixon one time in a tournament on Sardis. I could not, I had a sciatic nerve. I had to sit, and I had to sit behind the steering wheel, and he was up there front end and pop, 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 pop. He hit everything right in front of the boat. And I'd go right behind him, and I'd throw at the same bush he threw back maybe 2 more times, and bang, I'd catch a fish. And he said, you know, you've caught 5 fish, and they've got a fish. What's going on? I said, beats me. And I was going to tell him. But later I did. I said, you know, you were just hitting those bushes as fast as you could hit them and just moving on. I said, you need to create a sound path. They hear the bait and they move in the direction of that sound. And then the next time, here comes the bait right back the same way, and they move even closer. And the third time, you're right on his path, or he's right on your path. And he can detect it because he can see 5 times better underwater than we can. Their eyes receive 5 times more light than that of the human eye. So, and a crappie's phenomenal. I've gone to Arca Butler and Steve Price, an outdoor writer, and I went down there one day and I said, I want to show you something you're not going to believe. You see how muddy this water is? He said, yeah. I said, can you see that jig underwater? He said, no. I said, can you see it now? Barely. I said, Dad, can you see it? He said, yeah. I said, it's 2 inches under the water. But we were catching crappie 9 feet deep on that jig.
How about that?
That's
wow.
the truth.
Yeah, makes
So,
sense.
visibility, even in muddy water, my go-to bait, without question, is a 3/8 ounce black spinnerbait with a 5 Hildebrandt. Now, Charlie Hildebrandt, they make the best blade, polished. There's nothing that vibrates like a Hildebrandt blade. I've fished jillions of blades, and I called him one time. He said, you need some more five blades, don't you? I said, yep. He said, what are you going to do if Charles Fitz finds out you're taking his blades off and putting mine on it? I said, it's worth it to catch the fish on your bait. Your blade. So, but anyway, that is my go-to bait. If I was on Survivor, said you could only have one bait,
That'd be in your pocket.
I'll be.
Good stuff.
Toxie, you want the last question? We got a trivia for him, but you got a last question, or you want to do a wrap up here?
I'll make a few comments about it. I just was thinking back to those early days, and when you first heard about worms, it's funny because my Uncle Bud, you know, y'all hear about me talking about him and
Green
took me
trout.
fishing all the time. Yeah, taught me how to trout line fish, jig fish, all those things, but especially pond fishing and fishing in Tom Beebe River for bass. But it wasn't ever worms. He just said, you wouldn't believe this new, you know, because everything was like a devil's horse or a, you know, jitterbug or something like
13.
that. You know, you had some few spinner baits, H&H back then, but it was like a purple. It wasn't plastic worms. It was purple worms. He kept calling. The very first ones we ever saw had the little red bead and the little teeny spinner on the front of them, you know, with the extra hooks and all. That's the first one I ever saw back then, and I just still remember
that, I think.
Yeah. That's right. It sure was.
1949.
So
when it came out.
You said already, but what would be your go-to? One color on a plastic worm, or 2?
I like dark baits in dark conditions, and lighter baits in lighter conditions.
Right.
So that would apply to crankbaits, spinner baits, suspending baits.
You're saying match the water pretty much, right?
Yeah, I go back. If the environment is muddy, they got to eat to survive. And they've learned since they were small, living in that environment, they've got to find a way to do it. And their inner ear, their lateral line, gives them the ability to do that. So, and if you're fishing a lure, next time you're in a boat, just go by and look down, look into the water, and look for a dark object, maybe a stob, and look how well and how visible that stob is in that murky environment. and then take your bait and drop it right beside it. Like chartreuse and black. Everybody loves that in muddy water. Or chartreuse and white. Drop it beside that stop and tell me which one you can see the best. You're going to see the stop because you can. Drop that black spinnerbait beside that stop and you'll both of them equal. It's just, I don't know if you call black a color or a shade, but whatever it is, it's highly effective because it holds its identity. So on darker conditions at night, cloudy days, early in the morning, late in the afternoon, I seem to do better. This is me personally. I seem to do better with dark and darker shades of water at time of day, early, night, morning, or night.
That makes sense.
3 times. It's just it would just be darker colors at low light conditions and lighter colors. And I'll tell you a real quick example. I was fishing Redwood Reservoir one time in the Black Forest. Had a guy with me, Dick Wright from Nacogdoches, Texas. And I said, have you noticed something? And he said, what? I said, you see all those big puffies up there? He said, I sure do. I said, the last 4 bass I've caught right there throwing, I was on an old logging road and in the forest. And I said, if I throw a blue worm, blue light travels faster than any other color. And I said, if I throw a blue worm and it's cloudy, I may make 6 or 8 casts with it before I get a bite. But I can pick this rod up right here with a black worm, watch it, throw it with that cloud cover, bang, I catch one. Right back, bang, I catch one.
Wow.
And I said, I'm gonna wait just a minute until that sun comes back and I'm gonna show you. And you saw me catch 3 right in a row, didn't you? Catch 2 and lost 1. He said, yeah. I said, okay, the sun's coming out. Okay, you think it's bright enough? Yep. I throw the blue worm, go down, boink, they did it.
Wow.
It's
all about light and clear.
it's
so-
lighter. It's kind of an ice blue, but it's a lighter color, not a dark blue.
So
Well,
that was all my life from even as a kid and colors and whatever. I was like, there's nothing purple in the water for them to eat, whatever. And what you're teaching me, I think I kind of knew, but you crystallized it for me. Is like, it's way more about just the visibility than your bait's a perfectly natural looking bait. And that makes a lot of sense.
You know, people say, what does a worm represent? And you think about it a minute, we don't realize it, but it's a fact. There are aquatic worms in many of our rivers, creeks, and reservoirs. And they grow up to about 6 to 7 inches in length. We used to say it represents an eel, it represents a snake, but we never really classified it as what it really is. It's an aquatic creature that moves across the bottom, and it's something they feed on. They'll knock a rock over or a log over to get one. Why do they like a worm? Why worms are so effective, you can fish them in, through, around, and and different depth levels in the water column. They're an eye contact bait. They look natural. They feel natural. And the eyes of a bass, they're long and skinny, and they're easy to swallow.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
They're a lot of fun to fish.
Experiment. And this is just stuff that I've learned, and I've learned from other people, and I've put 2 and 2 together for what I heard over here to what I heard over here, and what I've learned. And it's a process of experimenting and learning, trying to learn something new on every time you go out. Why was that bass there?
Yeah.
Why did he hit this bait? What type of presentation did I use?
Obviously,
I
super observant.
used a good one.
Yeah.
Because I caught this fish. let's see if I can try that, do it again.
That's what makes
It's
somebody
just-
better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, hey, before Mr. Bill's got to get off here shortly, but Richie, I want you. Let's do our trivia question.
All
for
right,
him.
trivia today. Yeah, our listener today, the winner is K. Fred, and what he win? Bobby?
Yeah, some of the new Bones.
The slippers.
Yeah, the camo slippers or them Bottomland. They're gorgeous.
And,
yeah.
Isn't that shoe called a Brogan? Bottom.
I don't know. I probably need to find that out.
Bottomland Brogan.
Isn't that what that
But
is? Is that right?
Go to Bones, and it's got 3Zs.com. You can check them out. They're really nice. So
All right, here. All right, so Mr. Bill, here's your question.
Okay.
The first Bassmasters Classic was in 1971 on Lake Mead in Nevada.
Right.
There are many interesting rules for that event. One was a limit on lures in pounds. What was the limit in pounds on lures?
Oh, if you made the classic, you could only take 10 pounds.
Man, nailed that.
yeah, you did.
Took him a while. That was like
Like half a second.
I mean, he's got a better memory than anybody I've ever met.
yeah,
so-
me
gosh,
too.
unbelievable.
That's great stuff. That's right.
I
Super.
went to Lake Kiwi. We were flying a Delta jet, when all of us were on the class, going to the classic. It was on Lake Kiwi in South Carolina. And I don't know why I put them in there, but I said, they don't weigh anything. I reached over and I had 3 packs of Bill Jackson's Sportsman floating worms. And they were purple with white dots on them. And I said, I had them in my hand. I said, heck with it. They don't weigh anything. I threw them in my tackle box. Well, the first day of that tournament, I was paired, 3 days, I was paired with Charlie Searcy. And Charlie was an outdoor rider for the Nashville Tennessean, and then moved on to Chattanooga and became outdoor editor for the Chattanooga Times. But he was my observer in that big classic that Miller Lite, I think, put on. And anyway, I found these fish where a long point went out, a submerged point went way out, and the creek channel came down one side of it, and the Savannah River skirted the other side of it. And when I found them, they were 32 feet deep. Now, they were 34 feet deep. And I caught them on a Carolina rig, a 1/2 ounce egg sinker. And I was scared to, had it floating up about that high off the bottom. That floating worm was barely moving. It just suspend and just gradually fall. I twitch it a little and it moved. All 3 days, I caught a limit. And Charlie was in the back of the boat with a cigarette lighter, and he was fusing them back together. Wow, that plastic is hot. And he'd drop it in the water, and he'd pick it. I said, don't drop it in the water. Put it in the live well and cool it off. And I'd fix them back and feed them. I caught a limit all 3 days of that tournament, and they went from 34 to 52 feet. And I just knew I was going to lose. But when the tournament was over, I had 2 good ones left. So I think the limit, can't remember if it was 10 or 7. I either caught 21 or 30 bass on 7 worms in 3 days.
How about
That's a true story.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this has been so much fun.
No
Richie,
doubt.
we did forget to mention that the all that trivia that he got so quick, was brought to you by Peanut Patch.
No
They're
doubt
great,
about it.
great
Our
folks there.
favorite boiled peanuts.
Yeah, but I'm man. We could talk. We're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah.
No, honestly, so I thought I'd make a note. And I'm not just because he's on here. He is truly the greatest communicator and the storyteller in our history of hunting and fishing, both, really. And so that gift, having said that, we have a few on from time to time when they get off, we're talking to each other. It's like, I could have just sat there and listened to them all day.
Yeah.
And so I just want to say that's true as much or more than ever today, just to be able to listen to the stories it means so much because it is the extreme honor for myself and Mossy Oak to be working with you and helping communicate that, because it's so important for, and I hate to say different ages, but especially the younger generation today, which they do really look up to him still, but to listen to the things that he talks about, and it is so important. So important for the future of just doing things right.
Yeah, it is, and I think our younger people are very appreciative of the history and the traditions of what's been. And there's nobody that's done more and had more accolades and is more deserving than Mr. Bill Dance.
I would say the biggest
Thank
influence.
you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and we'd love to get you down here in person and sit on the couch so we could really get into a
Sure,
conversation.
I'd love to.
So,
You're probably going to have to cook a slab of ribs or do something, maybe bake a ham.
Oh, there you hit. Yes, sir.
so,
There we go.
Mr. Bill, hold on just one second. Before we let you go, I need to ask this. Lanny, what does the T on his hat stand for?
You really want me to go there?
This morning, what did you think it stood for?
This morning, we go on and on.
Nobody doesn't know that. Nobody.
Well, he thought Texas there for a little while.
Oh, my gosh. Wash your mouth out.
Well, we had fun with that.
Rocky Top.
Yeah, Rocky Top's
did have fun with
going
that.
to don't give out your home address.
Every fisherman should have a teacup and one of these shirts.
There you go. Yes, sir.
100%.
The horns on that one.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of Bill Dance stuff at the Mossy Oak store.
We do. We do.
Some of Mr. Bill and Kevin Van Dam.
Yeah, we tried to
Hey,
get you
you're
and
trying to run for president.
yeah, we
weren't
tried to get you and Kevin to
get elected.
we start a new party. The Sure Enough Independent.
that boat ramp fund to go up,
Yes,
wasn't it?
sir. I think he'd have made a good vice president for you too.
Well, Kevin had hogged the show. He always does.
I have a hard time believing that you would allow that as president.
No, I love Kevin. He's a great guy and a good friend.
No, Bill Dance, we have enjoyed
Oh,
this
my
so
goodness.
much,
So
and,
much fun.
and
was
we
really
want to
great
do
to
it
talk
again.
to you.
I
No
don't think
doubt
I got
about
but about a third through my questions.
Yeah.
No, we'll do it again.
We will do it again.
Count on it.
Yes, sir. Richie, did you hear he was producing 200 television shows a year?
Yeah, I know. I thought you were going to bring that up, Bobby.
Yeah, of course we're going to
Yeah,
bring
yeah.
that up.
Richie, we got some upside. We got
We got some work to do.
Yeah,
Yeah, Bobby. I mean,
And that's before the digital age.
that's right.
you got to make yourself available for all that.
On
Bobby.
tape to tape.
Rendering.
but boy, his work ethic is just incredible. So.
It is.
But I've thought about the communicating, the storytelling, and hey, just naturally, when you're doing what you really love, when God lets you get in that lane that you're getting to do what you really, really love in life, it just flows.
Hey, I'm gonna tell you, that's what stuck in my head. All this began with him, a prayer he had as a young boy.
That's right.
Yeah.
It did.
Sure did. How about that?
It's not work if you love what you're doing.
That's exactly
right.
right. Cuz says that all the time.
Amen.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Tell Cuz hello for
I
me.
will.
We'll do.
I will. Big time.
All right,
I
guys.
appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
This has been fun. Thank you to you, your family, Pam, for helping set this up. And we're going to do it again. I'm going to reach out and we'll set this up again. So.
Yeah, and thank you for the impact you've
Come
had
here
on
and
the
tell him
outdoors.
bye, Pam. She does it.
There's the boss
Bye.
lady.
Thank
Yay.
you.
All right.
Thanks for
that sounds
helping
good.
us.
y'all.
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
She's
She's the
couldn't
best.
make it without her.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
How
Yep.
about that?
She has extreme patience too.
All right. Why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.